When I went up to Minnesota to open my first Anytime Fitness, I remember I wanted to be in training, but I hadn't funded yet. And so they made me sit in the lobby on the other side so I could hear them training. Yet I just had to sit in the lobby for the full first day because I couldn't get a hold of my banker.
Oh my God. Are you serious? Like, isn't that like number one thing you do? I got to pay for something before I go to training.
Maybe I needed to know some tips before getting into my first one. Tyler, top 5 tips for buying your first franchise. You're sitting across from somebody saying, I want to buy my first one. What do you tell them is the top 5 things to focus on?
Why? Why are you doing it? Like, what is your why? You got to know your why. You got to know what your expectations are with the income, with your family. What is the purpose of doing this? So I know you got some thoughts on this too, Ryan. Let them have it.
Yeah, there's kind of 2 ways to think about it. It's either what is your pain? So what are you running from, right? Too many hours, don't like the people I work with, not making enough money, whatever that is. Or what are you running towards, right? What is it that you want in your life? I would actually, I'll use my example. I think I was running towards something. When I opened my first franchise, I loved my job. I loved my boss. I loved my coworkers. I was making more money than I thought I would. But I had this window of my life. For me, it was before marriage and kids. And so I wanted to try to get that established quickly. And then for the clients that I've worked with, knowing your why is that thing that helps you power through fear. Fear in this process can be crippling. And there's going to be lots of signs that kind of escalate that fear, right? You hear something that maybe you don't love about the franchise. You have a family member or a friend tell you, are you sure you want to do this, right? Whatever, you're about to sign a 10-year agreement. You got a personal guarantee on a loan, whatever those things are. Fear oftentimes will throw up its ugly head and say, time to stop. But if you know your why, if you're passionate about either what you're running from or what you're running towards, and you remember that, that should be more powerful to overcome any fear that you have.
Oh, you said something good there. Running from or running to. Simon Sinek, start with why. That's what reminds me of right there. That is perfect, man. I love it.
Yep, love that book. Highly recommend somebody reads it as they get into this franchise idea, right? Start with your why. Tyler, tip number 2, know your management plan going in. Talk a little bit about that.
This is such a big one. So I've worked with so many clients over the years, and the most successful ones know the person over the product, if that makes sense. Like, they know who's going to run this thing, and it's so important because people don't think about that. They're looking for the next big hot concept. They're not thinking about who's going to run this thing. That is the number one thing that I recognize when I talk to successful entrepreneurs or people who own multiple businesses. They focus on the who, which is the management plan, who's going to run this thing.
Yeah, this one actually makes me laugh because I've been in franchising for a long time. I love to network. I love to meet with my friends. I'll sit down, have coffee with a friend, and I'll put money on it. Every single time they say, hey, what's the hot new franchise? And it's an appropriate question. If I was not in franchising, I would ask the same thing. But it's a little bit of a here it comes or eye roll moment because my answer back is always, that's the wrong question to ask. So think about it in terms of stock. There's always a hot new stock. There's never not going to be a hot new stock. Same is true of franchising. There is always a great brand out there that is growing. Finding the brand is not the challenge. Finding the hot brand is not the challenge. For the people that I meet with, I always say, you're probably not running this yourself. They're at that stage of their life where they're not going to be the ones in there running it every day. So who is going to run it for you first? And then what? Find that person that you trust, that you believe in, that you can align your feelings or how you're going to be successful in the business with. So start with who, then I promise you Franchise Sidekick can go find you the what.
The next big thing, right? Okay. So with that said, though, this person, the management, people are going to help you, they've got to complement you as well, right? So if you're good with marketing, they need to be a good ops person. Or if you're good with ops, they need to be a good marketer. So keep that in consideration because I do see people come back and it's like their buddy or their nephew or whatever, and they don't have the skill set to complement them. So just think about that as you're finding the who, they've got to complement you.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on that is that it's an absolutely appropriate strategy as long as you know your cash position, which we'll talk about at another time. My little secret in franchising is of all the 20 plus franchises I've owned, every single time I've had an operating partner running the day-to-day. Outside of the first few months, back when I started my first Anytime Fitness, ever since then, it's always been an operating partner with me.
The who, it's so good. We have a great video on this on YouTube, building your super team. It's like a 15-minute video, I think, just goes over some details around how to find these people. It's a really great video. Okay, so tip number 3, momentum. So let's talk on that one, Ryan.
Yeah, well, first, I want people to hear this about momentum. This does not mean make a rushed decision. So no, when we talk about momentum, we do not mean make an uninformed or a rushed decision. What we mean is have capacity to do the process right. So one of the things in franchise development that I've learned is when momentum stops, the desire to open a franchise stops. Again, we go back to the why. What are we running towards, or what are we running away from? If we know that, and we truly want to make a commitment towards opening a franchise, we first have to create capacity for momentum to happen. Think about it. When somebody reaches out to Franchise Sidekick, we're usually going to say, let's look at a couple of brands, 2 to 3 brands that might fit your criteria. That's introduction calls, that's going over, FDDs, unit economics, validation, all the things that are involved. It's not a couple of phone calls and then you're done. It's called discovery because you are truly discovering everything about these brands and eliminating along the way. So make sure capacity is there. Don't have a vacation plan. Don't have a big work project coming up. Don't have something that's going to be an easy excuse to say, you know what, I don't have time to do this. Because I promise you, if you take a few weeks off, the momentum's going to slow down, and ultimately the percentages, and that means more people are going to stop than move forward.
And make it a priority. Life is about priorities, right? We all have the same amount of time in a day. Make that a priority every single day for however long it takes you to get through the discovery process. But I'll tell you this right now too, good franchise brands pay attention to momentum, and they know if they've got a candidate coming through and that person's not focused and not doing meetings, they're going to probably say this guy's not serious. And they've got hundreds, if not thousands, of people behind them that are taking it serious. So keep that in consideration because these brands evaluate you as well.
Yeah, I want to go back to a story real quick. Again, I love relating it back to my own experiences. And this was my first franchise that I ever opened was in Anytime Fitness, but it wasn't the first one I reached out to. I took number 1, I knew my why, and I took number 3, and I had created capacity for momentum in my life. I had reached out to GNC, which was a business that I was involved with as a manager, and I said, I'd like to become a franchisee. They came back pretty quickly and said, you're unqualified, right? You don't have the financial means to do this. That easily, if I allowed fear to creep in or wanted to make excuses around it, that easily could have been my way of saying, I got a great job that I love. Let's just keep doing that. But I didn't. I really wanted to move towards franchise ownership, and I had already created this capacity to go through the education or discovery process. So I quickly pivoted over to another brand that was growing that I had heard a lot about, Anytime Fitness, and I finished with them and ultimately became a multi-unit franchisee. But I knew my why, and I had created momentum that allowed me to continue going down that path.
So we've identified momentum as a huge factor inside of Franchise Sidekick, right? So our advisors are allowed to work with 30 clients at a time. And so if somebody is not moving along in the process, likely this is not a great time for them to look at a franchise. And so we tell our advisors, remove them from the discovery process and allow them to maybe take some time to revisit it, come back later down the road. But that's how important momentum is.
Tyler, makes perfect sense. And what a great transition to tip number 4, use an expert franchise advisor. Talk a little bit about that.
Ryan, would you buy a house without a realtor?
No,
not even a chance. So why would you buy a franchise? One of the biggest decisions you make without an expert advisor. That's really what it comes down to. You're not paying these people. They are paid by the brand themselves. So why not leverage their expertise in order to make the biggest decision in your life?
Yeah, you bet. And when you're using an advisor, it's not just an opinion thing. You don't want somebody just to say, I believe this is the right brand. They're going to take your criteria. Same, if you're looking at buying a home, I want to live in this neighborhood. I want to be in this price point. I want to be in a cul-de-sac or whatever, right? We do the same thing. We are going to take you through a proven process to understand your needs. Again, start with why, right? Identify a few brands that are going to fit that. Then when you get into the process, we're going to make sure you're asking the right questions in validation. You're looking at funding. We make sure that you're doing a competitive analysis and many other things to reduce your risk when looking at the franchise. But here's what was so compelling for me. So we've got a team now of advisors, and several of our advisors had bought franchises before they became advisors, and they did it by looking at just a single brand. And all of them now come back and say, I wish I would have used somebody that knew more, because they got so singularly focused on that individual brand. They threw their criteria out the window. I wanted something that cost less, but I like this brand. I wanted something that would make more, had fewer employees, but I like this brand. Right? You can't get so caught up on a brand that you throw out all of your other criteria. You can absolutely be passionate about that home that you want to buy or that brand that you want to develop, but let's not forget the other part of the criteria. And that's what your advisor is going to do. They're going to continue to bring you back to your why.
Not to mention all the inside information they have, right? So think about attorneys, for instance. Not all attorneys are created the same. There's franchise attorneys who specialize. We can connect you with franchise attorneys. Funding, whole another hurdle to go over, right? We can help with that as well. Just general inside information about the brand, because a lot of our advisors will be like, hey, this brand's going to tell you this, but think about this, or look at it from this perspective, or whatever. Like they know what's going on. Just like a real estate agent, they know the market really well. These guys know franchising really, really well.
Yeah, and Tyler, you said something that's so important. There's no lack of franchise advisors, consultants, brokers, whatever you want to call them out there. But there is a lack of, there's disparity in those that are better than others. Some that are doing it part-time, some that have it as a side gig, and some that's all they do. They've dedicated their life to helping people find the right franchise. And so I think it comes down, when you're picking an advisor or using one, I think it comes down to two things. It comes down to, do I trust this person? And are they competent? Can they truly help me find the right brand? What resources, what experience, how many other people have they helped? So ask the questions to make sure that person isn't just saying they have your best interest in mind, but they truly do have your best interest in mind.
And this is a reps business. Like I would say this, like the more reps, the more times they've done this, the more experience they're going to have. Where to your point, there's a lot of people out there who just haven't done the reps. So they don't know what they don't know is what it comes down to, So I would ask that advisor, how many times have they done this before? Have they done multiple deals? What kind of deals have they done? What kind of clients do they work with? All that stuff. Just be prepared to ask that to your advisor. Number 5, validation. Probably the most important one here out of all these. Talk on that, Ryan.
Yeah, I would remove the word probably and say the most important one. Validation. What does that mean? It means speaking to people within the franchise that can share their experiences with you. I mean, that can be franchisees, that could be former franchisees, that can be employees, it could be leadership of the franchise. And every brand is going to do it differently. But my advice is you go in knowing the questions you have to have answered and make sure you get them answered before you make a decision. So sometimes when you're working with fast moving brands, they're going to put you in a group validation. There's pros and cons, right? The pro is you get to hear a lot of questions other people are asking. A lot of times when I've been in those, that's a great question I never would have thought of asking, but now it's important to me, right? You can really learn from others. If there's a con there, you don't have as much diversity in the types of folks that you speak with. A lot of times the franchisor is setting those calls up, and that's okay. I mean, why would you not want to speak to somebody that's had success? But let's also hopefully get an opportunity to maybe speak to people that took a little bit longer to create success, right? Let's talk to executives in the franchise. In the FDD, and we can help you find this, there is an opportunity for you to get the contact information of all their franchisees, of their former franchisees, right? So again, it's not about exactly the perfect way to speak to somebody or who to speak to. You want to speak to a lot, small, large, successful, unsuccessful. I believe the most important part of validation is being sure you understand the questions you want answered and making sure you continue in validation until those are answered. What do you say?
That's great. And I'd say the other part of this too, validation, is you are also validating the existing franchisees and also the people looking at the brand. Keep in mind, if you sign this franchise agreement, likely a 10-year agreement, you're going to be married to these people for 10 years. So validate the executive team, the existing franchisees, but also who is looking at the franchise, because you're going to get to know them really, really well.
Okay. So Tyler, we said 5, but like all things at Franchise Sidekick, we try to underpromise and overdeliver. So let's go ahead and dive into a bonus, number 6. Have enough money when investing into a franchise. What does that mean to you?
Have enough money. Like know your budget, right? Know your expenses, know how much money you have access to, know if there's any upcoming things happening that's going to affect your cash flow. All that stuff is very important. So we've got some videos on that. We've got some calculators and things as well. But it's extremely important because there's nothing like signing a franchise agreement, getting through one location. Maybe you have a 2 or 3 location deal and you run out of money. Not a good situation, right, for anybody. So that's a really, really important part of this process.
Yeah, you bet. Two things that come to mind for me. Number one, coming into the process, know where you stand financially, right? Have you built a personal net worth statement, right? What are your assets? What are your liabilities? We can help you walk through that as well, but have a good understanding of where all those are. Second is credit score. If you plan on borrowing, you're going to have a solid credit score. Do you have that? If you don't, let's just get in front of that right away. Do we have a partner? Do we have somebody else that can come in and be financially responsible along with you for the franchise? Then the second thing is I often see this in brick and mortar or retail type franchise concepts where somebody gets excited about the opportunity. They want to buy multiple, which is great. It's a great way to create wealth. Many times, multiple locations are important to hit the financial goals that we have. However, don't do it in a manner where you can't afford what you've purchased. What I mean by that is, let's say you're buying 3 fitness concepts and you're like, the cash from number 1 is going to fund number 2 and number 3. I know it's hard not to buy it at the front end, but I would say buy what you can afford, get in there, run a great business. Hopefully you have the opportunity to buy more territories of that concept. And if you don't, like I said before, there's always going to be another concept that is going to be around that you could buy and leverage your team. So those are my 2.
Great. One more thing there is it starts with building that pro forma, because you have to build a pro forma so you know how your business is going to be projected to do. So take the time, take a couple weeks if you have to, build out that pro forma, run it by your accountant, get some business advisors to look at it as well. But just think about, what is the best case scenario and worst case scenario for you and how that is going to affect your budget long term.
Tyler, awesome. The 5 most important things to consider when buying a franchise. For me, helping people buy a franchise is one of the most important parts of my life. And I think this is a great video to help people kick off. If you want to learn more, go ahead and subscribe, follow us. And if you're interested in engaging with a Franchise Sidekick Advisor, go ahead and click the link below, where a 10-minute call could maybe change your life.